UAM is just a step up from small UAS or UTM, right? Just the scale happens different. And instead of just flying below 400 feet, now you're flying in mixed altitude, you're flying low altitude and high altitude, and you're going to integrate with all the traditional crewed aviation at higher altitude. So it becomes more complex. There are more challenges, but the building blocks are the same.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 340. What's evolving in the global UAS traffic management sector? For that question, we talk with Amit Ganjoo, CEO and founder of Onra Technologies, an award-winning drone operations company based in Washington, D.C. The company's platform is called SmartSkies, and it's used by multiple commercial and government entities for running and managing commercial drone operations. Amit is a serial entrepreneur and has over 20 years of aviation, telecom, and wireless experience in both the federal and commercial space. He is an engineer, a licensed pilot following a lifelong passion in aviation, and he builds experimental aircrafts. Until December 2016, Amit acted as the co-chair of the FCC's Technical Advisory Council for 5G and Internet of Things, which included ground and airborne autonomous vehicles. He was the director of engineering and principal architect at Ericsson, providing telecom solutions to commercial customers and the federal government, where he was the recipient of the Athena Award. He was also the founder and CEO of a mobile marketing company from which he had a successful exit in 2009. Amit is also an adjunct professor at the George Mason University and shares his passion for engineering by teaching in the School of Engineering and volunteers at a local makerspace in the D.C. area. In this edition of the Drone Radio Show, Amit talks about Onra Technologies, its enterprise drone solutions, drone delivery, urban air mobility, and the role the company plays in delivering unmanned traffic management systems to enterprise organizations. But before we hear from Amit, I want to thank those of you who are supporting my funding campaign. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And by the way, if you have a great story on the use of drones that you'd like to share in a podcast, contact me at randy@droneradioshow.com. Let's find out how Onra Technologies is delivering enterprise solutions with Amit Ganjoo. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Amit to introduce himself.
I'm Amit Ganjoo. I'm the founder and CEO of Anra Technologies. Anra Technologies is an airspace and mission management company. We are headquartered in Washington, D.C. area in North America. We have operations and offices in Asia as well as UK, Europe. And with our customer engagements spread pretty much across all the continents. That's our summary, and we work with the enterprises as well as air navigation service providers such as FAA and others around the world.
How long has the company been in business?
This is our 6th year, so we've been in existence for 6 years now.
And for those that may not be familiar with Onra, what does the company do?
We do a lot more, but if I was to simplify it at 10,000-foot level view, we make sure as with the next generation UAS or drones are flying in the skies, they stay safe, and we create these virtual highways in the sky and make sure drones stay in those virtual highways and don't go bumping into each other or aircraft or flying into areas they shouldn't. In addition to that, we make sure that those drones that are actually serving a purpose for an enterprise, they get integrated into the end workflow of an existing enterprise. So it feeds into, because at the end of the day, drones are just a means to an end. So how the drone enables, whether it's data collection, whether it's an inspection service or delivery, it has to, at the end of the day, integrate into the enterprise and the existing workflow. So our systems focus on that as well. And then our platforms overall focus on creating an air domain awareness, which is for cooperative aircraft and non-cooperative aircraft, whether it's on the commercial side or on the defense side.
You mentioned that your customers are primarily enterprise clients. Are they public or private entities?
It's a combination. So our solution is more like, I call it a set of Lego blocks, and you can put the Lego blocks together to build a small hut or a castle based on what you want. So we have all these Lego blocks, and based on the enterprise or a government customer or DoD or whoever the customer might be, they get to pick certain number of Lego blocks and the types that best meet their requirements. So our customers range from enterprises, in some cases enterprises that are using our services, in other cases air navigation service providers. So it's a combination, if that answers your question. So it depends on which part of our functionality they're picking. Some may pick a lot more than others pick less.
Speaking of UTM, what role does Onra play?
We come at it from an inside-out perspective. So we're not just building the technology, we are actually defining the standards that the whole industry has to follow. I chair the ASTM F38 standards body, co-chair it. This is the same body that pushed out the remote identification ASTM standard. And just as of a couple of weeks back, the UTM standard, the first ever global UTM standard, actually went through the ballot and got approved. It's going to get published here in the next couple of weeks. It'll be the first official interoperability UTM standard. So at the end of the day, different UTM systems will implement this standard so they are interoperable and work with each other and other systems, ATC systems and others out there. So to answer your question, we define the standards, we define the technical requirements, then we also end up becoming a technology provider inherently because we implement that as well. So UTM is a very loosely termed, unfortunately, because UTM means different things to different people. If you talk to 10 different people, they'll give you 10 different definitions of UTM. UTM is not a thing by itself. It's a concept. It's a framework. It's a bunch of these services that have to work together to ensure the safety of the airspace system. So we provide all these different pieces.
I've seen some articles connecting Onra technologies with drone delivery. Can you tell us about the company's involvement in these types of services?
Drone delivery is just another application because airspace management is an underlying thing that is required for all drone applications. So it's like, think of it as this horizontal layer, and then different applications are these vertical layers on vertical pillars on top of it. So drone delivery is one such pillar. So from our point of view, we've been engaged in drone deliveries for a while. So in addition to the airspace management, we have something called SmartSkies delivery, which is an end-to-end delivery management system all the way from order placement, order fulfillment, to integration into an airspace management system, creating an on-demand corridor and tracking the aircraft from vendor location to customer location and back. Everything end-to-end, and also integrating into back-end asset management, asset tracking system. So from our point of view, we've been engaged in some pilots, experiments, and then transitioning into operational deployments in different parts of the world. So we have done pilots in US, like demonstrations in Florida and other places. We have done projects in United Kingdom. We are right now creating a digital twin for a medical delivery network for the National Health System in Scotland, which is connecting central hospital to remote clinics all around the country and using drones to connect them to deliver supplies such as blood, vaccines, and other things. We just wrapped a project in Japan as well for drone deliveries for medical purposes and some other general commercial use products. In India, we led a consortium in partnership with companies such as Swiggy, which is one of the biggest food delivery platforms in India. And we did a pilot project approved by the Ministry of Civil Aviation and the DGCAA, Airport Authority of India, and the Director General Civil Aviation, where we actually flew in 2 different cities in the country. And it was all beyond visual line of sight deliveries for food and medicine, to prove that it could be done safely in those environments. And we flew over 1,100 kilometers, over 300-400 sorties over that period. And now with all that data captured, now we move on to the next experiment to show that this can be done safely. And now we've gone back to the regulator and say, this is how it can be done safely. And now from here, we move on to the next step. Then we also worked on a project with World Economic Forum for doing medical deliveries in another state as part of the Medicines from the Sky project in India, where it was taking medicines and delivering it to remote rural parts where typically it would take hours to get there by road, and here you can deliver it in minutes.
It sounds like the medical and high-value types of products are really rising to the top in the drone delivery market. Is that how you would characterize it?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. And actually, I have a friend. I can't take credit for it. I have a friend who says blood before burritos, and I believe that. So anything that has humanitarian aspects kicks in, and that has more appeal to people and acceptance from the customers and general public. So rightfully so, medical deliveries and humanitarian deliveries have a lot more appeal, and we see those happening and gathering and scaling up faster than other deliveries, maybe which are more novelty items.
Do you see drone delivery becoming a major service of Onra Technologies?
We've been talking about delivery, but we are not really a service provider. We are not a drone delivery. We're a technology provider. So we license our technology to service providers or enterprises who want to run delivery management services or logistics companies. So we are not a logistics company. So we are a technology provider. So as we go to different parts of the world, there are existing customers or existing traditional delivery mechanisms that are being used, and now they're looking at new ways of reaching out to their customers.
Worldwide, where do you see these types of services gaining traction right now?
So we are seeing a lot of uptake in the Asia Pacific region early on, because there's a lot of remote rural parts of the world which are typically hard to use, which technology such as this would really add value to. So we see that. We see a lot of uptake in those areas. In Europe and North America, we are seeing interest. It's more calculated. It's moving at a more modest pace compared to what we are seeing elsewhere, if that makes sense.
Being a global company, how does Onra stay current with and manage the demands of all the different countries that you serve?
We don't sleep. That's what happens. We lose sleep trying to keep up with stuff. So it's a great question, Randy, and I wish there was a magical answer I could give you that we have it all figured out. We are figuring it out as things go along. Different markets move at different pace. They have different regulatory challenges, and we work in a collaborative fashion. That's one of our differences. So we work on the policy side, on the regulatory side. We don't go in as a technology provider necessarily. We go in as someone trying to help build the framework, build the regulatory environment up, and bring our lessons learned. One of the benefits we have is because we worked in so many different jurisdictions. So we take best of the breed, lessons learned from all over the places, and go and help these people. And that's how we tend to handhold and work in collaboration. And some move faster, some move slower. And in some cases, we encounter folks that are pretty closed and they're like, it wasn't invented here, it isn't good enough. So it's a mixed bag of things. But overall, at a global level, things are moving in the right direction. Obviously, as an industry, as a vendor, it never moves as fast as you want, but it's definitely moving in the right direction.
We know that urban air mobility continues to evolve. What's your perspective on where things are at today?
Just so you know, we are the technology provider for advanced air mobility, urban air mobility too. So our platform, SmartSkies, has been used by NASA in all the UAM national campaigns. We are doing urban air mobility flights in 3 countries in Europe, in Spain, in Netherlands, and UK, with 2 different OEMs, Technalia and EHang. And our software is enabling, our airspace management system and mission management system is enabling those integrations, because UAM is just a step up from small UAS or UTM, right? Just the scale happens different. And instead of just flying below 400 feet, now you're flying in mixed altitude, you're flying low altitude and high altitude, and you're going to integrate with all the traditional crewed aviation at higher altitude. So it becomes more complex. There are more challenges, but the building blocks are the same. So we definitely see that happening. Are you going to see a bunch of people flying in these flying taxis over the next couple of years? No. But you will see in the crawl, walk, run over the next 4 or 5 years, you'll see experiments and limited scale pilots happening, people doing it for recreational use. But what you will probably see happening before large scale people moving is uncrewed cargo before you see actually people flying in these flying taxis.
The urban air mobility vehicles that are contemplated, will they fly in a completely different level of airspace, or will they be sharing airspace with other aircraft?
There are different ConOps, like concept of operations, different countries are rolling out. In some cases, they say, okay, let's create a dedicated corridor. In other cases, it's going to be mixed use day in and day one. But in a lot of cases, depending on where you're flying, you will have to integrate with existing aviation. So you can't be in this silo, because if you're flying beyond visual line of sight or you're flying close to an airport, you are going to have to interact with crew traffic that's flying there. And if you're, let's say, you're taking off from a driveway or a parking garage, and you're going to start at low altitude, which is below 400, and there may be small UAS operating. And as you climb up to 1,000, 1,200 feet, there's VFR traffic and other crew traffic that's flying there. So you have to look at all these aspects. But there will be some corridor set up dedicated between a vertiport and vertiport, which may be like carve-outs, like, hey, it's a dedicated corridor just for UAM traffic. So those concepts are also being exercised. But eventually down the line, this semi-segregation is going to work in the near to midterm as there's no scale. But once scale starts happening, it's all going to be mixed-use airspace where all actors have to share the same airspace, and you're not going to be able to segregate anymore.
In some of my other interviews, I get the feeling that certain countries are starting to be more restrictive with their regulations, while others are finding ways to allow more entrepreneurial use of drones. I'd like to get your perspective.
That is true. That is absolutely true, what others have told you. So, and I don't want to pick on specific countries, but there are countries that are extremely strict. And there are countries who have gone from one extreme to another, where they were extremely strict, drone usage was banned. And they've gone from one extreme to the completely extreme to making it a wild, wild west where go and do whatever you want. And then there are others that are somewhere in the middle. So it's not a consistent answer. It kind of lines up with the answer I provided earlier. So a lot of the countries in Asia Pacific region are leaning in a little bit more. Africa, they're leaning it a little bit more. And rightfully so, in many of those instances, the density of air traffic is low. So they can afford to have a little more flexibility awarded to the entrepreneurs and the industry. Whereas in dense urban airspaces like Europe, you have to be extremely diligent from day one. So use space in Europe is, with the regulatory framework, they're falling into place and it becoming a rule. And by January 2023, use space needs to be implemented. So Europe is moving ahead at a nice pace. US is a little bit behind right now, but I'm on FAA's Aviation Rulemaking Committee as well for BV laws. And as our recommendations go, and hopefully over the next 12, 18 months, that becomes a rule. Once that comes about, we will see that I shouldn't say open floodgates, but it'll open up the gates and we'll see a lot more upward swing happening.
How would you describe your best customer? You know, the company that would really get the greatest value out of the services that Onra Technologies delivers.
I think our best customer would be enterprises that are looking to leverage drones to introduce it into their business, to make their business processes more efficient, whether it's from a logistics point of view, whether it's from a surveillance point of view, or the sorts. And they would use our underlying airspace management, then our additional Lego blocks that they need. That would be our ideal candidate. And those are some of the best customers that we work with. But with that said, I don't want to alienate. We also work very closely with air navigation service providers, because at the end of the day, all these air navigation service providers that provide traditional air traffic management capability are going to look at providing airspace management capabilities for drones and this next form of aviation as well. So technically, both of these are our ideal customers.
What's next for Onra Technologies?
I like to use the term innovation, experimentation, and operationalization. That's the phase in the crawl, walk, run. So what I see happening in 2022 for us is speeding up of the transition from experimentation to operationalization. So everyone who was running pilots and trials now looking to scale this operationally. So instead of moving it from the innovation cell of the company, now it moves to more operational and mainstream. That's what we see happening.
I've interviewed many people that have successfully demonstrated the capabilities of drone technology. But taking a pilot project to an operational program has got to be a huge challenge. How do you approach something like that?
The honest truth is it's a mindset, right? Because it's a different mindset when you're running research or you're doing a prototype and a one-off, it works for a flight and you get a PR out of it and you're done. But scaling something that handles thousands and millions of transactions per second and scales and doesn't fail, it's a mindset. It's like building a product versus building a prototype, if that makes sense. So we have always come at it from the point of view of safety and building a scalable system versus a one-off system that gets used and we get a press release out of it and that's it. That's been in our DNA and ingrained in our whole team. So we always built our technical stack and our capability, keeping that in mind, which is why when I mentioned earlier, we come at it from an inside-out perspective. We build the standards, because if all we were cared about is just building a prototype and getting a press release, that's different. But we are driving the standards, and now that the standards are out here, when you build a system to the standards, that will interoperate and scale. That's not something that needs to be forklifted. That will scale as the industry scales, and that's how we are building these systems. I'm not saying we have the whole problem solved, because the scale isn't there. The scale is happening, but I believe we are very well positioned given our legacy and how we've been operating and building our capability to have a system that allows us to go from where we are to where we need to be and scale operationally.
Now, you've been with Onra Technology since the beginning.
Yes, I founded it in my garage back in 2015.
What was the inspiration behind starting the company?
My background is aviation, robotics, and communication. I came from the communication industry. Then I used to work with the Department of Defense on drone and communications programs. So drones are relatively new in the commercial space, but they've been around in defense arena forever, right? So it's old news in defense. So I saw the transition happening to the commercial side, and I realized the set of challenges they were encountering. And I saw when you come to the commercial side, those challenges just get multiplied times n. It becomes more complex. So that's what was in my mind. And then back in 2015, I hired a couple of interns and we built a quick and dirty prototype and took it to an event in DC in the summer, fall of 2015, just to showcase the concept. And we got the Coolest Technology Award. And 2 weeks later, I had a call from NASA and talked to NASA. And NASA said, hey, why don't you put a Space Act collaborative research agreement with us? And I'm like, why? It's like, because the concept you showcase lines up with what we are looking to research called UTM. So unknowingly, we ended up where UTM was.
Amit, what have the past 6 years taught you?
I've taught me to be grounded and patient because this is one industry where you can't short circuit things and move fast by creating a hype and buzz. As you may have realized over the past few years, you've seen a lot of names come up and go away and stuff like that, because it's become like one of those shows like Last Man Standing, literally, right? There's a right time to do things because you can't short circuit regulations. This is a regulated industry. So you have to work. Technology always precedes regulation. But if you're so far ahead and regulation is 3 years out, unless you have a way to survive till the regulatory framework comes into place, you won't be there. So we've been fortunate. We have had great relationships and great team that believes in the mission. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And we've always been there since day one, ready for a marathon and hope to be there at the finish line.
What advice would you give to other entrepreneurs?
I would say jump in at the deep end. It's just like raising kids, right? There's no user guide that tells you exactly what to do. You just figure it out. Yeah, there's a lot of resources, a lot of mentorship and guidance you can get, but you have to make your own set of mistakes. You have to learn from them. And obviously, the less mistakes you make, the better, and use guidance. But it's OJT. The best way to learn is jump in there. You can have the best business plan in the world on paper, but till you do it, it's not worth anything.
Is there anything that keeps you up at night?
Unless I have a challenge to solve, I get bored. I have very short attention span. So I always look for new challenges to solve. And as we are transitioning from small UAS to bigger UAS, there are UAM, AM. There are a new set of challenges as we move into upper E and other higher altitude airspace management. So there are a lot of other challenges there. So that's what I just think about, what could be the solutions and stuff. So that's what motivates me. So it doesn't keep me up at night in a wrong way. It's just something that motivates me, I would say.
Are we at risk at reaching an innovation plateau in the industry?
Randy, honestly, it's like the smartphone analogy, which is cliched. A lot of people use it. When Apple introduced the smartphone, everyone was, yeah, it's great. But till the app revolution took effect, no one really knew the potential of the smartphones. It's the same thing. We are in the same place in this industry. We're just scratching the surface.
And for my final question, Amit, what message would you like to leave regarding the future of the drone industry and the opportunities that it avails?
Depending on which part of the world you go to, there's a lot of buzz and hype. What I personally believe is we need to find the right balance. Some people in the industry do disservice by creating too much buzz and hype when in reality it shouldn't be. We have to find that middle ground because there's a reality somewhere in there, not go to the extremes on each end. The UAS industry, the drone industry is great and it's going to be an enabler. It's the future, but it's not the end all be all. It's there to stay. It has its places. There are limitations, but yeah, we just need to figure out what the best use cases and pursue those. And I think that'll get us to the finish line.
That's it for episode 340 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Amit Ganjoo of Onra Technologies. I want to thank Amit for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about Onra Technologies or want to connect with Amit, check out the webpage at onratechnologies.com. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.